And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of Conversations with Curtis. I'm Curtis Davenport, and very honored and excited to have with us as our special guest today, one of, as I've introduced him, one of the leading members of what I consider to be the first family of the music we call jazz, and that is Mr. Ravi Coltrane. And we're just so glad to have him here with us as he is playing this weekend at the Stage Door Theater, 4 sold-out shows. The first 2 happened last night, and we have 2 more tonight. So, first of all, Mr. Coltrane, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Curtis.
It's been a pleasure to meet you.
My pleasure.
So we'll just talk a little bit, and I'm going to get to, I guess, my first question around your choices. Obviously, you had a lot of choices where you could have gone growing up. What made you decide to not only become a musician, but to play the exact same instrument that your dad became legendary for? What made you decide to go in that direction?
Well, I think sometimes it's not a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the music chooses you. I've always loved music, and sometimes you don't realize how much that love, that feeling is affecting you kind of underneath the surface, and kind of quietly and softly guiding you kind of through your life. When I was very young, I was into classical music. My mother played a lot of classical music in the house. Obviously, we were listening. My mother's also from Detroit, so there's a lot of Motown music being played.
Oh, yes.
So I love James Brown. I love Igor Stravinsky kind of equally, and didn't see those types of music as, I just heard it as music, really. Anything that sort of moved you and compelled your ears. I was also into photography and filmmaking. My mom had movie cameras, Super 8 regular cameras. So I was making little movies when I was a kid, and had a little editor, and I'm splicing things together. And get your friends together. I think SWAT was the TV show that running around and chasing each other. So part of me really thought that might be something that I would engage in as an older person. I still love photography and filmography, but I started playing clarinet in junior high school, and I played in the marching band in high school. I wasn't thinking about jazz. I wasn't thinking about the saxophone. But suddenly that music kind of started calling out to me. It started to really get it started to pull me in, really. My mother played my father's records for us growing up, so I was aware of my father in that sense. He passed away when I was 2 years old, so I don't have any memories of him. Sure. But the music was always something that I was aware of. Yet it didn't really kind of hit me until I was older, maybe 19 or 20, really. This was the time my older brother, John Jr., was my father's first son. I was the second son, and my younger brother, Ran, the third son. My father had 3 kids between 1964 and 67.
Okay.
He passed away in July 67. My younger brother was born in March 67. But my older brother, John Jr., sadly was killed in an automobile accident when he was right after he graduated high school. He was a good kid, and I still think about him all the time, regularly, not every day. After John passed away, there was, it was a shock to the system, and there was a void that opened up. And I believe my father's music filled that void for me in a way that I didn't anticipate or expect. and suddenly I was compelled to just to go further and listen more and more. And then I started listening to Sonny Rollins, and I started listening to Charlie Parker. So it was an entryway, via my father and his music, but it opened the door for me to appreciate all jazz music and really become a lover of that music. And so I was playing the clarinet, and I thought, all right, well, I love listening to jazz. I love this music. Maybe, I should investigate playing it,
Okay.
to see if I can also love it on that
Yeah.
level. It's great to love this music as a listener, but yeah, I did want to investigate playing it, so I went to a school called California Institute of the Arts.
Mm-hmm.
I think I started in '86. I was 21. So I basically went there to learn how to play jazz. But I never had any intention of saying I'm going to be a musician. This is going to be my life, and this is going to be my career. I went there just to learn about the music, and also to see if it was something that I could even do, or had a real, profound interest in pursuing. So yeah, one year led to the next, and that led to the next, and I sort of kept doing it. And then I started making trips to New York, and being in New York City, that really it sort of gave me an idea of what was possible. The energy of the music scene. I mean, so much of the history was still there.
Oh, yeah.
And it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced growing up in Los Angeles in terms of access to some of the world's greatest musicians. Art Blakey would be playing at Sweet Basil's. Tony Williams would be right up the street at the Village Vanguard. And Joe Henderson and Freddie Hubbard would be playing Fat Tuesdays. It was surreal. It was surreal. And energizing. I could not wait to move to New York. I knew that's where I wanted to be. I knew I wanted to be part of that world. And that's what compelled me to continue with music and with the saxophone. So in a lot of ways, I didn't choose the saxophone.
It shows you.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure now, when you got to New York, I'm sure you were at least taken under the wing by a few of the musicians I know, Elvin and Rashid Ali.
Absolutely.
And McCoy, others who knew and played with your father. What kind of experience was that just with them? Did they immediately embrace you, or was it difficult?
They did. Yeah, for better and for worse.
Yeah.
Elvin Jones called me when I was still in school studying, and he asked me to be in his band. I said, I'm not ready. I'm still studying. I'm still in school. He said, I want to help you get ready. He asked me again, and it's like you can't say no twice to Elvin.
Yeah, right.
So that's how I got into his band. It's very premature. That made it hard because I couldn't play at all. But it was a beautiful experience being around him. He was a one of a kind jazz. Electrifying presence, and a just kind man. And of course, the affection he had for my father, it just overflowed in my direction. And that again really kind of allowed me to move to New York and go on the road for the first time. I was talking about touring. My first tour with Elvin Jones was 2 months long.
Wow.
2 months in Europe of one-nighters, where you're playing in a different city each night. And there was some of those runs that would be 12 nights without a break.
Ooh, man.
Some of the lobby calls were 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. About 5 or 6 hours of traveling. Check into the hotel, a sound check, and then you maybe have a small meal, and then you play the gig. And then the next day you do the same thing. This was before kind of the roller
Yeah, right.
Suitcases were back there. So I had a fold over. I have 2 fold over.
Oh, man.
Suitcases carrying my saxophones. I think I brought my cameras up there with me, and I loved every moment. It was fantastic. It was fantastic. So, and he was a beautiful mentor and a friend, beautiful person.
Yeah.
Rashid Ali. Again, these were the musicians who were in my father's groups.
Yeah.
Rashid was the drummer who came in after Elvin, and was my father's last drummer. Also made many gigs and recordings with my mother, Alice.
Yeah.
And my mother was playing a gig with Rashid in 1988 in Japan, and I think Reggie Workman was on that gig, and she brought all of her kids, my younger brother, myself, my older sister, and we were in Japan for 2 weeks. My sister loved Japan so much she never came back. She ended up living there herself for 2 years.
Okay.
And hanging out with Rashid was so great, and he was like, come to New York, come to New York, come to New York. So that school break that year, that was my first time really going to New York on my own without my mom, just whatever. And that was, again, life-changing. And I stayed with Rashid. Rashid Ali bought a building in Soho during the 70s.
Okay.
Smart man.
Yeah, I'd say so. That's exactly what I was thinking, man.
Rashid has passed on,
Yeah.
of course, but his family is still in that building. It's some of the most expensive real estate anywhere in this country. But that was my introduction to New York around 1988. I would go every July and stay at Rashid's place. He'd have jam sessions every day.
Wow.
Musicians would just filter over. He'd still be in bed.
Oh, just come on in. Yeah, You'll get up.
Doorbell would ring. Patricia, his wife, would answer the door, and just the young players would come in. And they'd start kind of messing around with their instruments, and Rashid would hear that. He'd get out of bed, get on the drums, and we'd jam for a few hours. And we did that every day, and every night we'd go out to the clubs, and he took me to every club in New York, introduced me to all the musicians. And when someone takes you under their wing, that was doing it in the truest sense of that phrase. Rashid was a beautiful, beautiful father figure to me, and really helped me a lot during that time. I did work with McCoy many years later after I'd been in New York and had gotten established a bit. McCoy was also just an incredible dude. Again, they all had so much love for my father, and the period of time, relatively short amount of time that they spent with him, it just affected them for the rest of their lives. McCoy and Alvin and Rashid, they spoke about him all the time, and just with such regard. And and it was all those things they wanted to share with me. So, in many ways, it was a blessing. And again, the curse part of it is like, okay, well, you're getting opportunities that maybe other musicians might be more ready to take on, or there might be more study for you to do. But you have to kind of take it all in. You take it all in. I would love for all of them to be around today, because I think that was the best period of my time playing music in New York, just being around the elders. And to suddenly living at the time without your mentors. Essentially, my primary mentors, Rashid, Elvin, McCoy, Jerry Allen was an incredible mentor to me. Charlie Hayden. They've all passed on. Suddenly you're in this world, and it's like everyone is younger than you, and maybe you're compelled to pass on things to them. I guess it's just the natural course of things.
that cliche says the circle of life, so to speak, goes forward. Can we talk a little bit about your mom and her influence now? Obviously, she was aware of where you were going, and how did she, when she realized that music was calling you, this life, was she encouraging? Was she concerned? How did your mom, who was also, of course, a great innovator in her own right,
Yes,
how did she feel about realizing that her son was heading down this path?
I think it made her happy. I
Okay.
think it inspired her, I think she, music was not anything that she ever pushed on any of her children.
Mm-hmm.
She never said, you have to do this, you need to do this. I think that was something that she felt very early on when we were very young. But obviously we were exposed to, lots of music and creative expression around the home. So, when we started to take to it on our own, my older brother John was playing bass. He was also on the football team. I was in the marching band. He was on the football team. You can imagine who the cooler kid was. My younger brother also was playing alto and playing guitar. My sister played violin, a little bit of guitar. So yeah, when I started playing, my mom, she wanted to take us out with her. She wasn't doing that much public performance at the time, but once we kind of picked up the instruments, she wanted to kind of play a little bit more with us. She always was very, very encouraging. She was the one who kind of said, you should go study with Charlie Hayden. And Charlie was the artistic director at Cal Arts. That's how I ended up at the Institute of the Arts. Charlie was a huge advocate of Alice and has performed a lot of her recordings from the 1970s. She was very, very encouraging, and I had that opportunity to encourage her.
Yeah, translinear life.
Yeah, and I was more like begging. I said, Mom, please, let's just go into the studio. Let's record something.
Because it had been a while, hadn't it? Hate to jump, but just it came to mind. I know it had been quite a while since she had recorded before. That outstanding, I guess, final statement, Translinear Light in 2004. For those of you unfamiliar with that album, I know you had a lot to do with that. So you said begging and beyond begging. How did you get your mom into the studio after over 20 years?
Well, she had before she met my father. She was developing as a young pianist. She started playing as a young girl. A classical training. Not formally trained in classical music, but there was no jazz training in the schools. You kind of learned the traditional types of piano repertoire. So she had that foundation. She also played organ in her church every Sunday as a teenager. So that's another foundation. And her older brother was named Ernest Farrow, who was a bassist, jazz bassist in Detroit. Played with Yusuf Lateef.
Yes.
And he encouraged my mom to check out jazz music. And my mom did. She got compelled, and she loved Bud Powell and began kind of playing in the style of Bud Powell. And she moved to Paris in '58 for a young black woman from Detroit to do that at the time. It was kind of unique. But she wanted to be around Bud Powell. She wanted to be around the music. And there's some videos of her. You can find them on YouTube. Her performing with Kenny Clark on drums, Lucky Thompson on tenor saxophone, Pierre Mijulot on bass. It's a great name. She's
doing her thing,
bebop, She really played bebop. She was great. when she left Paris, she started working with a vibraphonist named Terry Gibbs.
Yeah.
And Terry Gibbs had his bands were often integrated, and he often had black female pianists.
Yes.
And Terry Pollard was the pianist in his band before my mother, and Terry Pollard recommended Alice to be in that group.
Okay.
So she came to New York in the early 60s and played at bebop and playing great. And I guess it was around 63, 62 or 63, she met my father at Berlin. And this was the days of the double bills,
Yes.
two bands we played for the whole week. So the John Coltrane Quartet and also the Terry Gibbs Quintet, or however the largest group was, for a week. And Terry Gibbs tells the story. He takes the claim of introducing he says, if it wasn't for me, you would have never been born. At a point, maybe. But my mom would just say, she was quiet and kind of introspective, and my father was quiet and introspective. So I think the week went by where they didn't really speak, but there was something happening.
Energy.
Yes, there was something happening.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, she said near the end of the week, she recognized it, because when he would finish his sets, he would go to the dressing room and practice. He wouldn't ever really put his horn down. The rest of the band might go out for a smoke or drink or something else, but he would be in the dressing room practicing. But my mom realized by the end of the week that he was following her around, playing the song. What's this song? I'll think of it in a second. Take Two. Song from Frank Sinatra used to sing this song.
Got you on the
Always.
Always, yes.
I remember you. Always.
Yep.
Love that's true. Always. It's a very sweet song. And a little corny, but sweet. I think she recognized this over sentimentality in that song.
Yeah.
And so that was his sort of way of saying hello.
Guess it worked.
So they connected at that time, and my father wanted Alice to kind of go on the road with him, not performing, but just to be with him. So she kind of had to leave Terry Gibbs' band to do that. It was not long after that they started their family and bought this home in Long Island. So my mom was, kind of raising kids and being a partner to John, and a kind of musical foil and creative partner for him. By 1965, the end of 65, John's quartet was starting to come apart, because his music had again expanded so far that it got to a point where McCoy didn't want to do it anymore, and Elvin didn't want to do it anymore, and they hung in there for a long time. They did, but my father was hearing other things in the music. He just was hearing a more expansive sound. Brought in another drummer, Rashid. Brought another saxophonist, Pharoah Sanders. So the band was getting larger, the concept was getting bigger, and McCoy kept saying, "I couldn't hear myself. I couldn't hear myself," and that's why he left the band. My mother did not replace McCoy. My father didn't fire McCoy to hire Alice.
Right.
Those guys left, and John was changing. He was changing, and it was time for the energy to shift. So my mother came into the band. Alvin left. Rashid became the primary drummer. Pharoah obviously stayed with my father throughout all of that time. So it was about from 1966 until the last few concerts that my father did in mid '67.
Yeah.
So that was, when he passed in 67. And my mother was 30 years old, widowed at 30 with 4 kids, and had already had such a very unique musical experience up to that point in her life. Classical training, piano, spiritual music, in church, on organ, bebop, piano by way of Bud Powell and Paris, more bebop with Terry Gibbs, and suddenly John Coltrane's very expansive music, moving into styles of free jazz, avant-garde styles of music, and then that stopped, and so she had a few years to kind of reorient herself, and she went through some trials and tribulations. She did write about those things, but that culminated with a spiritual awakening, and she recognized a new path for herself, and music was a part of that path, but a profound spirituality was a part of it as well. This is around 1968, 69, and then she starts to make her own recordings.
Yes.
Her recording career starts at that time. Yeah. But by 1978, about 10 years later, she's done.
Yeah. Okay.
She wants to spend the majority of her time, with her spiritual practices. And, she would say, as far as the music was concerned, as far as jazz music was concerned, she felt like that she'd already done that.
Yeah.
And in the true sense, she had, going back to 1958. So it was a good 20 years where she worked in that sort of musical genre. But her interest in Eastern philosophies and music that just really started to kick in. And, she was traveling to India several times a year, during the 70s and 80s. She ended up doing that for most of her life, really. Seeking out spiritual advisors and gurus and teachers. And that became her life, really. And suddenly she became a spiritual advisor, teacher, and a guru. She started an ashram. And the music that she made was based in that realm, that culture. It was not jazz music anymore. It wasn't improvisational music. It was devotional songs, sung in Hindi. And that was her life for most of my. When I started music, she left music.
Oh, okay.
Jazz
wasn't
music,
intentional.
jazz
Yeah.
But she always still played. She was playing
Yeah.
every Sunday. It was more like maybe what she was doing as a younger person. But again, in this other kind of religious or spiritual framework.
Yes.
Eastern thing. And I'd come to LA. I was living in New York at the time, and whenever I performed in LA, my mom would come out to see me, and I would say, "Come on, play with me." And she'd get up and burn.
Oh, yeah.
She'd get up and play great. And it's like, Mom, let's just record. Let's do a record. And she's like, "No, I've already done that. But she always played great. She wasn't recording jazz or touring, doing any concerts, playing jazz. But when she did play it, she played great. When she improvised, she played great. So, I had an opportunity to do a record with Jack DeChanet for ECM. This was maybe around 2000. And I thought, let's do something with Alice. Let me just ask her. Let me just see if she'll come in and just record a few tracks. And the idea was that we would just play organ, drums, and saxophone.
Okay.
And we did record a few tracks. The ECM thing fell through, because all the labels were kind of falling apart at that time. All the deals were kind of drying up. A few years went by, and we were doing a re-release of Love Supreme. We had found some additional tracks. We had a special edition, so we did this re-release. gig at Joe's Pub in New York, and there were going to be some musical performances. Some people at Verve said, "Hey, would your mom come out? You think she would play?" I said, "Well, I'll ask her." So my mother came out. She performed. She played great. And it was like a week later. The people at Verve were like, "Yeah, would your mom like to do it?" No, they were calling me to ask.
Yeah, I know. I noticed that.
They were like, would your mom, do you think she would record a record with us? I said, we started recording something, and yeah, we'd love to come and finish it with you. So that's how that came about. We went back into the studio, recorded additional tracks, and we put the record out in 2006. Sadly, she passed a year later, 2007. But in promotion of that album, we did 4 performances with her. We played at NJ Pack in New Jersey. We played in Paris at the La Villette Festival. Maybe it was just 3. And the last concert that she played was in San Francisco, Masonic Hall. It was part of the SF Jazz series, Ravi Coltrane series. Yeah. And that was maybe November 2006. It was the last time I saw her. She passed away in January 2007. That was the one year I didn't go home for the holidays. Isn't that the thing? But that record was, for me, I feel that's the greatest achievement that I've had in my career, just getting my mom back in the studio.
We were all just better for having that one final statement from your mom.
Yeah, absolutely.
So important she is, and we appreciate your efforts in it. Let's talk about your relationship to your parents' musical categories and legacies now, or I should say catalogs, I don't want to say categories, catalogs. I know like when you played last night here, you paid tribute to both your parents and some of their compositions. Has that always been easy for you, or did you have to like come to a place of comfort with your parents and their compositions and their music?
Everybody plays John Coltrane. Too.
Yeah. Right.
Because it's great music,
True.
And it's the kind of fuel that we have as young people learning this music. We really take that music in when we're learning John's music, Monk's music, Wayne Shorter's music. It's music that we know and love, and it's fun to play those tunes. It's fun to play my mother's music.
Yeah.
When I first started my career, it was basically '91. I started with Elvin, and when I moved to New York, any gig, of course, people were, I love your father, I love John Coltrane, I've been listening to his music for all my life. I heard that a lot in the beginning, but suddenly I started hearing, I love Alice.
Yeah.
I didn't really know about John, but I heard Alice when I was in college, and I saw her in concert. And when is she going to perform again? That was another thing I told my mom too. I said, "Mom, I just got back from Europe, and met a lot of people. They keep saying, when are you going to come back?
Yeah.
When are you going to perform again? When are you going to record again?" So I appreciate the fact that today there's as many admirers for Alice's music as John's music. So I do like to play her music in a sense. And John's music, of course, is something I hold very, very closely and dearly in my heart. But also musically, it's a part of the repertoire. It's a part of what we do.
Let's talk now. We talked a little bit earlier about how you were mentored, and we alluded to the fact that now at well, your age for a lack of better term. I was trying to think of a way to smooth it, but
58.
And I was not going to say that. I wasn't going to tell, but I'll just say you're at least.
I can't lie and say I was born in the 90s.
I was going to
Believe me,
tell
I would.
But as we've talked about, you have starts to take on that role of mentor to many young musicians, and you've got a couple of great young musicians on stage with you here at the stage door this weekend. Well, let's even talk about them, Mr. Howe and Mr. Lahavi. Yes, how did you, just them particularly, how did you meet these fantastic young musicians? How did they come into your life?
Well, there's something, again, beautiful about this world that we all kind of exist in, the music world, the music that we appreciate and love the most. And we end up traveling in similar circles.
Okay.
We ultimately kind of come into contact with each other. I met our keyboardist and pianist, Gotti, when he was 13.
Wow. Okay.
He was living in Tel Aviv at the time, and he'd come to me. He'd come to the States to do a workshop at Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
His parents brought him, and he did this workshop. And Joanne Brackeen is still a mentor of mine. I worked extensively with Joanne during the 90s, and we even played some of her music. Joanne was teaching at this workshop, and so she met Gotti before I met him. And I was playing a gig with Joanne at Jazz Standard. Unfortunately, we don't have that club anymore in New York. And I was on the stage with Joanne, and we're in between tunes, and she's making an introduction. She's looking at me and she says, "Oh, there's a wonderful young pianist out here." She's just sort of pointing in the audience. I didn't really see what she was pointing at. We finished the set, and I'm standing at the side of the stage with Joanne. She's kind of greeting people. People are thanking her for the music and the set. I'm standing with her, And another group of people come over. She says, "Oh, this is," she's talking to me. She said, "Oh, this is the pianist I was talking about." So I'm looking at this dude, and I was like, "Oh, it's nice to meet you." She says, "No, not him. She literally points down, and I was like, "Oh." It's like, "Hey, nice to meet you." Yeah, I mean, he was 13, but he was tiny when he was a little guy. So, he looked like he was about 10 or 9 or 10. He was a little guy, long hair, and nice to meet you. So the second set, they were at the second set. The gig was over, so a lot of us just went, to the bar and we were having drinks and having conversations. About 30 minutes went by. We could hear some piano music, and I look over and it's like, oh, it's this kid. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. The more he played, the more beautiful it became. I mean, he just sounded so great, and my whole attention just went to what he was doing. Left the bar, and I sat right in front of the piano to listen to him play. And a whole bunch of us moved over to listen to him. I think he played Stella by Starlight. He played it beautifully. We finished. We were, play more. And then he played a Chick Corea tune called Humpty Dumpty.
Yes.
Not a easy tune.
No, not at all.
He played the coda at the end, the correct coda and everything. And I was like over the moon. This guy was playing so well. And I just grabbed him and gave him a hug and everything. And I said, "Man, if you want to come by the house tomorrow, we could play some duets or something." Him and his parents were supposed to go back to Tel Aviv that day. They'd already been in the States for a while in Boston doing this workshop, and they came to New York just to go to some clubs. So they ended up changing their ticket. I only found that later. And,
gee, I wonder why.
And Gotti came over with his parents, and we played duets for a couple hours, and I just was amazed how he was playing and how he was listening. So creative, and there's been a lot of young musicians who learn how to play and improvise in jazz context at an early age, and it's impressive, but sometimes it feels kind of mechanical, and sometimes they play like to show you how much they know. And Gotti never sounded like that, he just sounded free of all of that. Just very, very creative. And obviously could hear anything I was playing, and just free, just such a, again, a beautiful spirit. And I said, I was calling people, like, man, there's a kid over here. You got to hear this guy. I'm going to check this dude out. You know? So yeah, he was 13 at the time. I stayed in touch with him. It's like, man, he blew my mind. Man. Yeah. I just was sort of mystified by how great he was playing. You know, I'd heard him play solo piano, jazz standard. I thought it was wonderful. He came to my house. We played duets. I thought it was amazing. But I hadn't heard him play with band.
Yeah.
And he told me his parents said they were taking him to Smoke, this club in New York, because he wanted to play the jam session.
Okay.
It's like, okay, this will be the test.
Yeah.
I gotta hear this dude play with a drummer and a bass player. You know.
And this is when he was still young.
He was young.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I only met him the night before. But
Okay.
The next night,
He's at Smoke.
he came to my house.
Mm-hmm.
My kids were there. My older son was playing piano at the time. I wanted him to play something for Gotti. He was like, no. But I went to go check him out at Smoke, and he jumped on the piano and sit in. It was a jam session. Again, he was this little guy, and they played a blues. I think it was Straight No Chaser. And he played a break into his solo, and I just got out of my chair. Went right to the front, just sat down and listened to this dude play. And I was like, he's doing it. He's really doing it. You know? And the marvel was he'd only been studying jazz for 2 years.
Wow.
He'd only been studying jazz for 2 years. He could play Chopin when he was 6 or 7 or 8, you know. But when the jazz calling got to him, he went in deep. He went in very quickly. I think Oscar Peterson, was the first pianist he heard that influenced him. Then he heard Chick Corea, and that really influenced him. Herbie. And within a couple of years, he was improvising beautifully. So I've been playing with him ever since. I've always stayed in touch with him. I think he came back to New York a year later. I hooked up some gigs. We played together at a record recording session we did. You won't hear anybody like him. Yeah. And now what he's doing now with the 2 keyboards, it's really something unique. You know, this band started with a bass player, but the bass player couldn't make the rehearsals.
Okay.
Rehearsals.
All right.
So it would be Eli playing drums, Gotti just on the piano, and me playing saxophone on these rehearsals. And one rehearsal, Gotti showed up with a keyboard, and he set it on the piano, and he started playing the bass parts along with the piano parts. And I was like, I think we need to do this. I said, let's try this on a gig. And we did a kind of a little underground gig in Brooklyn, a little local place. And it was great. And we haven't had a bass player ever since.
Wow.
Gotti is a marvel. Mr. Howell.
Yes, Mr. Howell.
He is another marvel.
Yes.
I mean, the thing is with this dude, I always get 2 questions with Eli. The first question is, where did you find this drummer? And the second is, can I have his phone number? I'm going to call him for good. So I met Eli when he was 21. He's been playing a very long time. His father is a saxophonist and educator from the Bay Area named Richard Howell. Okay. So he's been playing with his dad for a long time, and his dad, an excellent saxophonist. So Eli can hear all those notes. They get in there with it. During the pandemic, everything closed in New York. Everything was closed. Restaurants, clubs, the bars were closed, everything. But there was a place called the Montauk Club, which was a private club that started in 132 years ago. In the Park Slope area of Brooklyn, near Grand Army Plaza. And a friend of mine had a membership there. And she would kind of say, hey, there's pianos here. There's a piano on both floors. It would be great to have some music here. There's a beautiful bar there. Very spacious. And they never closed because it was a private club. So I actually became a member. And I started inviting bands to come. and I was playing there almost every week, and I was using it as an opportunity to find new players, young players, and I don't know if you've heard JazzArts Douglas.
Oh,
you have.
Yeah, man.
JazzArts is the man. He's one of the best bass players on the scene right now.
That he is, yeah.
I met him years and years ago, and was fortunate enough to have him in my band for a good 10 years. You know, we still play often. When I play at Birdland at the end of this month, the Desert will be in that group. So I was inviting him to come to the Montauk Club, and one week I didn't have a drummer. I said, man, if you know anybody, you know, could you bring somebody? I said, if you have any students or if you know any young cats at the scene. He said, I know somebody, I think you'll like him. And he brought Eli, this tall dude, big baby face, all his leather on, black leather jacket, and man, he played so great. Oh yeah, he just played so great. I've been calling him ever since. And the first time Gotti and Eli played together was at the Montauk Club.
Okay.
They had never met; they'd never played together before. But it was one of those matches that was made in heaven. You know? Not only musically, but also just in terms of their connection. The gig ended, and Eli had his car and said, hey man, where you going? You need a ride? So they ended up sitting in the car for an hour just talking about music, playing music, you know, listening to music on the radio and talking. So their friendship and bond kind of happened very, very, very quickly. And I was like, yeah, this is the way to do it. You try to let it be as organic as possible, the process of meeting these players and having them come into your world, or you come into their world, and bringing them together. You know, finding the musical parallels, the common ground that we can share as musicians. You know, it has to be done naturally. It can't be forced. It's like, well, I want my drummer to play this way. I want my hands to play that way. I want them to do this. But it doesn't really work.
Yeah.
That's not my feeling or intention or plan for what I want to do. I want things to come together naturally. Yeah. That's when it feels best. You know? And these guys hit it off right off the bat. Again, I've been playing with Gotti since he was 13. I feel privileged that I've been playing with Eli since he was 21. I think he's 24, 25 now. Maybe 26. I can't tell anymore. I can't keep track.
It's okay. There's no test, man. You know?
But yeah, it just makes the music better. It makes the music better when things come together naturally.
A couple more questions. One, just I guess, since we're on the subject of young musicians and influences and what have you, we have, of course, in our program here at JazzArts Charlotte, we have a lot of young musicians who come through our educational programs, and they're always looking, when they have someone like you, for some type of advice. And I know it's generic, and I'm saying this very broadly, but what, if anything, would you have as advice for budding young musicians coming into the field now in the 21st century?
Oh, well, I guess I just have to think about what my mentors told me, and it's usually things centering around finding your own voice, which kind of is a concept can be kind of abstract. Yeah, it's like, well, I'm learning. How do I find my own voice? Just trying to learn what everybody else is doing, what the history is, theory and the academic, and it's like, well, how do you know when you find your own voice, or how do you know when you're ready to find your voice? That's harder to to express, articulate that part. But I think when this music really developed, that was really what the goal was. It wasn't to sound like your mentors. It wasn't to sound like your teachers. It wasn't to sound like who the most popular player at the time was. It was to sound like yourself. And if you did sort of copy somebody else's style, they'd call you out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. Yep.
They'd say, "Oh, this guy, he's." Well, there's a few expressions.
Oh,
for
yeah.
that. He's
Yeah.
carrying, Sonny Stitzel,
Mhm.
laundry or dirty laundry or something
Yep.
like that.
That's one of the cleaner versions. That'll work.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you were not praised for imitating somebody else's style. You were kind of looked down on it. I think that's very important. And it's something that maybe is not stressed as much today. Young musicians are now encouraged to sound
Yeah.
like everyone else, because that lets people know that you have learned this music. You know how to play jazz because you sound like somebody else. It doesn't focus their attention or attitude toward something more personal,
Yeah.
or meaningful. And I don't think we would have had any musicians if that wasn't part of
Yeah.
part of the process, part of the meaning of being a jazz musician. Having your own voice, following your intuitions, and following them with courage. I think it does take courage to try to embrace who you are.
Yeah, man.
And your own sound and your own musical ideas. It's easier to play like somebody else. You don't have to think about it. You just have to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Pick up a record, oh, I can play that. Yeah, I can do that. Look at me,
Yeah. John Coltrane, I think, is such a great example of a courageous musician and creator and artist and saxophonist, because he did follow his own voice, his own intuitions, his own ideas, even when people didn't want to hear what he was doing. Even the critics. I mean, he got some of the worst critiques of anybody during his career. A lot of cats were like that too. Ornette, they tore these guys apart, but at the same time, they knew that that's what they had to follow their own path, and thank God that they did. I do like to encourage young people to follow their paths and embrace who they are, even if they're still in the process of learning who they are. Maybe that's a process that we spend a lifetime engaging with and learning about. I remember being young and, of course, just wanting to play like my heroes, study Ralph, John Coltrane, and Joe Henderson, transcribing all the music, records, blah, 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 and then a bunch of young guys came around. Branford came around. And man, everything for me became Branford, all his records, transcribing the solos. I remember doing a demo. I was still in school. I sent it to Kenny Garrett, great alto saxophonist Kenny Garrett, who I love and admire still so much to this day. I just wanted him to hear it and give me some thoughts. And he said, "It sounds good, but too much Branford."
Okay.
I was like, oh, okay. So I guess I shouldn't be doing that. And there was another saxophonist, a dude named Ralph Moore. I don't know if you know Ralph.
Yes, man.
Ralph became after Branford, Ralph.
Yeah.
That was my man. Any record he played on, I had to have it. Any gig he was on, I would have to go and hear him. And I remember he was teaching this Stanford workshop a long time ago. I ended up doing this workshop. I don't know if I actually signed up for it, but I just went.
I just showed up.
Because I wanted to hang with Ralph. I just wanted to hang with this dude. And I just love the way Ralph plays. I really, was transcribing solos. I was really just way into Ralph. And I remember telling him one night, it was one of those sort of fanboy moments. I don't think that word existed then, but I just felt like I had to confess. I said, man, I just want to be you. I just want to play like you. And he looked at me with this look of disappointment. He was like, he's like, man, you could only sound like yourself. You could only play like yourself. And I had to take that to heart. I mean, again, being young, you do want to play like your heroes. You do want to sort of emulate them. It's like you're emulating something else. You can only be yourself. And the quicker we can accept that fact and embrace it and go forward with courage, the better off we are as musicians. That's my advice for young musicians, old musicians, anybody.
I hear you. Final question around, of course, you being the keeper at this point, by extension of the Coltrane legacy. And of course, we talk about the Coltrane home, Dix Hills, New York, not too far from where I grew up in North Babylon.
Oh, okay.
So, yes, sir. So, talk about, at this point, I just want an update. I'm sure people are wondering, how are things going? I know there's been a lot of work, and you've been heavily involved in the preservation. How are things going with the preservation? What is needed? What can people who want to help do?
Well, we always need help.
Okay.
It's been about a 20-year project. We started this nonprofit about 20 years ago. The house had been condemned for years. The last owners, they just sort of let it fall apart. The roof caved in. Raccoons were living in there. A lot of mold built up in the basement, like years and years of mold, which took years and years to deal with, to get that mold out of it. So repairs and restorations have been very. That was really the first phase of the project. We've had a lot of great support federally and also from the state and through Suffolk County. We've gotten many grants. Mellon gave us a grant a few years ago. The fundraising is always a part of it. You can check out. I don't want to give you the wrong email address or website, but I think it's Coltrane Home or House. .org. You can look it up.
Yeah, look it up.
We have a fabulous board. Everyone's working very hard, mostly volunteers. We do have plans to open the home to the public. We want the house to sort of exist as a symbol of the creative energies of John and Alice. It's a beautiful place to visit, to be inspired, and the project is ongoing.
Okay.
And we're starting another project in Philadelphia. My father's home in Philadelphia. There was a small, it was actually a large issue with the deed to the home and the ownership of the home, and it passed hands several times. But the home was actually was deeded my grandmother's will to her grandchildren. So a lot of that stuff was recently worked out. We do have some federal assistance and some protections. That house was declared a historic landmark, a national historic landmark. Many years ago. The house in Dix Hills is also a national landmark by the state of New York and Suffolk County. There's a lot of work to do. And all support is much appreciated. But again, these homes we feel can exist as symbols for these amazing artists and what they were able to give to the world.
We'd love to. Once again, those interested in helping, you can go to, I'm not sure whether it's Coltrane Home or Coltrane House.org, but make sure it's .org, of course, and but hopefully, Google is usually able to help you along.
The John and Alice Coltrane Home of Dix Hills. If you Google that, you got
that should take you to where you need to be.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'll ask, I know we're kind of at the end of our hour. Would you have time for maybe a couple of questions from the audience, if I could?
Okay.
So I'd like to. Can we? Okay, just looking toward our producers here to make sure. So, open. I'll have to ask you to please raise your hand. It'll be very school-like, but I do want to keep some order. If you have some questions that you'd like to ask Ravi Coltrane at this point.
No pressure.
Yeah. Will Campbell, of course.
I'm curious to know who are some of the young saxophone players that are just emerging now that you see the most promise in.
Interesting. There's a few guys. We just lost one of them, Casey Benjamin.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Played with Robert Glasper. Very, very creative,
Yeah.
very, very talented dude.
Yes.
There's another young, amazing young player named Timothy Sanders, who's the
Okay.
son of Pharaoh.
Oh, wow, okay.
Wow.
I've known him since he was there. Now he's up here and
Okay.
he's playing great tenor. He's playing fabulously. Timothy Sanders. Check him out if you can. There's a guy named Stacy Dillard,
Yeah.
who I enjoy very, very much. Stacy plays.
We've
Great.
had him here in the jazz room.
He's,
Yeah.
he's one of my favorite of the young dudes. There's a young guy named Ben Wendell. If you checked out Ben, he has a band called Knee Body. Again, I met him when he was a student at Eastman in the 90s, and I've been sort of watching him this whole time. He's really a fabulous musician, just fantastic. Great composer, incredible saxophonist. Let me see who else is out there. Oh man, anyway. Lakeisha, you know,
Yes,
Benjamin, she's,
yes.
you know, she's got a lot of energy, you know,
Oh, yeah.
good spirit, you know.
Nice tribute she did to your family a couple of years ago. That
Oh yeah,
yes.
yeah, absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. I'm trying to think who else I've heard. Sometimes I forget the names, you know, but there are lots of fabulous players who come to New York, you know, lots of great young players playing all the time. Thank God.
Yes.
Keeps the music going, you know. Absolutely.
Other questions? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Given your history with photography and cinematography, so it's a two-part question. Do you still practice photography as far as like has
Let's get a
the
break out
music
my
and-
Fujifilm.
has the
It's back
music,
at the hotel.
has the music influenced your eye for photography? And the second part question, has anyone ever approached you about doing maybe a movie about your mom? I mean, like, I'm just sitting here listening to the story
Yeah.
Yeah.
that you're talking about and how amazing she was.
She was, absolutely.
And have you ever thought about reaching out to somebody or approaching somebody and doing a movie about? And I would call it Alice. I think that'd be a great
We
title.
got the
Yeah,
time.
there you
Now
go. We got the time.
We
Ready to
just
go,
need the
man.
script and the budget.
But that,
The funds.
Yeah, man.
but just like listening to you talk about her and her raising the kids and her career and moving all over these places and
She had an extraordinary life.
yes,
Yeah.
It was she was a very unique person, very unlike anyone. I mean, she just was, given her background, she was born in 37, August 1937 in Detroit. I don't know how many siblings there were, 6, 7, you know, all living in one room, you know.
Wow.
You know, that was that time, you know, the economic opportunities for Black Americans at the time was a very different story. Segregation, those things were still so prominent in the American culture. You know, lots of things to overcome. You know, and music was her vehicle for that in many ways, but also the power of her convictions and her beliefs.
Yeah.
You know, that was the vehicle as well. You know, that got her to Paris. You know, that got her to New York. You know, that got her in this, you know, realm of encountering somebody like John Coltrane. You know, and having the expansiveness of thought and openness of thought. You know, start studying Eastern philosophies and music and traveling to India and wanting to become a spiritual advisor herself. And creating a style of music in the 70s, that was, those records are wild. What she was hearing and what she was trying to put together, her music, harp, organ, piano, strings, writing the string parts. Amazing, and then giving it all up, letting that part of it go, not giving it up, but moving on, progressing. She had a natural progression. She was a very, very unique person. John's story is different. He played saxophone. He practiced the saxophone. And then he died. He played, practiced, recorded, toured. He put everything into that instrument. Everything that was inside him. So in one sense, it was one track that he was on. It was. Again, he went as deep as anyone could ever have gone, and the vibration of what he did, it's still resonating today. There's no way to diminish what he did by saying it was one track. If I could live one track life, believe me, I would. Instead of trying to worry about the Dix Hills house, the house. And this situation here and that one there. And if I could put all energy into music, into the instrument, obviously there are things to account for in your life. Obviously, your personal life is very important. Family life is very important. That was important for my father as well. But the energy was so very specific in this one lane: music, the saxophone, and the expansion of his musical ideas. It's harder to make a movie about a guy practicing 8 hours. That's a different type of story. It's a profound story for all of us who get to benefit from what he created, without a doubt. But to see that on screen, they have to bring other nonsense into it. Did he have any fights? Did he get arrested? Was he? They'll make the movie about that. It's like the Charlie Parker movie that Clint Eastwood made. I saw the premiere of that. Herbie Hancock was sitting in the row in front of me. He got up and left. He left at one point in that. We were also disappointed because they didn't focus on the music. They focused on the nonsense. That's, Hollywood needs to do that. If you got 2 hours to tell a story, you can't. Their lives were just too. The music is. It's very deep, and to try to squeeze that into a 2-hour format, that's very difficult to do. I wouldn't have any problems watching a movie about a guy practicing for 8 hours. But maybe you're not going to sell that many tickets for that. Alice's story is different in the sense that it had all these different facets in and outside of music, and it's very unique, her experience. It would be great if that could be told in some way. I just don't know who's going to do that, and who's going to do it accurately, and who's going to do it without me strangling him if he gets it wrong. It's my mom, after all.
Sure, man.
It's a very sensitive thing, So, we get approached often. People who want to do her story. So maybe someday.
Almost. There was one more question I know I saw from you folks. You've been sitting here so attentively, so I wanted to give you the opportunity, sir, for the last question.
I was just wondering, being based in New York City, are you able to play as much as you want in the city, or are you still kind of forced to be out and traveling?
I'm curious. There's tons of gigs in New York.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had risk kind of overexposure. People are, no, you want to go see Ravi? No, we can do it next week.
It's still the same vibrant place that it was when I first started traveling there. Again, this is my experience. It's so funny. Everyone who gets to New York, whenever they get there, somebody's going, "Hey man, you should have been here 5 years ago. You just missed the loft scene, or this place just closed." I think that, whenever you get to New York, yes, there's still this vibrancy. There's music happening everywhere. Brooklyn and Manhattan. I'm fortunate. I'm going to play the Birdland after this tour is over. I do a week at Birdland, usually right before summer. I play at the Village Vanguard. I do a week there, usually in fall. When the Jazz Standard was around, I would do that in the winter for a week. Now I kind of do Blue Note around February. I play small little unannounced gigs in Brooklyn, little bars and little dive places. We go and test the music out and just have a good time. I do sideman work. I just played something, did something with, where was I? Oh, that was actually my own gig, sorry. Jazz gallery. But yeah, people call me for gigs. I'll do them. I'm fortunate to have my own gigs in New York. Traveling and being on the road is a beautiful virtue. It's great to be out on the road and being in different cities and meeting different people. In this country, in Europe, Japan. I love touring in Japan. I'm old now. I've been on the road for 30 years, I guess.
Wow,
30
yeah,
plus
that's
years. And it can, I enjoyed it a lot in the 90s and the 2000s. Traveling was different then too.
Yeah, true.
Anything before 9/11 was different.
Yeah.
It gets harder to travel. I don't like traveling. I like arriving. And so I haven't done a Midwest tour in a very, very long time. There's often circuits in this country that are hard to kind of link up. I often do more of a northeast kind of circuit. I play gigs in New York, I play in DC, play in Baltimore, play in Philadelphia, Boston, or West Coast, play San Francisco, play Oakland, Santa Cruz, LA, Albuquerque. There's a gig out there, the Outpost.
Okay.
In the middle of the, Chicago, I play the Showcase once a year. I'll play anywhere in New York, out of New York, and it's the same with all these guys too. These guys are working constantly. They work in New York, they're in Europe, they're in different parts of the States. I'm just happy people come out and still support the music.
Thanks for coming to Charlotte.
Thank you for coming
Thank
to
you.
Charlotte.
Thanks for having us. Thank you for having us.
That sounds like a good point for us to, as they say, put a period on it. But Ravi Coltrane, thank you.
Curtis,
brother.
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming out. Thank you for being here. Thank you for all that you do for the music and all that you do for the legacy
I
of
appreciate
the
it
music
very much.
as well.
Thank you.
So, well, we're not going to be broadcasting this before the shows tonight, but we will just say once again, thank you all for your support of JazzArts Charlotte. To find out more about what we do with JazzArts Charlotte, you can go to our website, thejazzarts.org, to find out what we're doing in the jazz room, also to find out about how to support our education programs. So, on behalf of all of us at JazzArts Charlotte, as always, I'm Curtis Davenport, and I say thanks for watching, thanks for supporting, God bless you, and we'll see you next time. So long, everybody.
Bye.